our panel discussion is called Early Age Onset Colorectal Cancer Scientific Updates and Member Work to Increase Action and Awareness. And so I'm Peter Liang from NYU and our VA in New York Harbor in Manhattan. I'll introduce all the speakers first, and they'll come by one to give their talks, and then we'll follow up with questions. So our first speaker is Dr. Ying Kao from the Washington University School of Medicine, where she is Associate Professor of Surgery. After that, we'll have Dr. Lynn Durham, who's President and CEO of Georgia Center for Oncology Research and Education. And that will be followed by Dr. Cynthia Yoshida, who is Professor of Medicine at the University of Virginia. And lastly, we're followed by Andy Dwyer, who is Director of Colorectal Cancer Screening Program at the University of Colorado Cancer Center and the Colorado School of Public Health. So first, I'll hand it over to Dr. Kao.
All right. Thanks to Dr. Liang and the committee for inviting me. Such a real honor. I've been hearing this meeting for many, many years. And when Becky said this is her favorite, and even after one session, I couldn't agree more. This is becoming my favorite. Please, I'll join next year. So thanks everyone for leading in the field. This is very, very important topic. And especially thanks Dr. Liang for tasking me to talk about the scientific update on early onset colorectal cancer instead of asking me why it happened. So, well, you see the subtle difference, but if there's one single message I want you guys to take away from my talk is that the scientific community is united to trying to figure out why. And if there's a second message, is that we need everybody to jump on board, not only cross disciplines in terms of scientific research, but also cross communities, including patient advocates, including public, and also cross the border. We need international collaborations, which you will hear more from this session as well. All right, so here is my outline for today. And as Becky mentioned, and led by her team in American Cancer Society, now early onset colorectal cancer is increasing in 27 countries and territories worldwide. And as you can see here, the US really has the top burden in terms of absolute risk, almost 15 per 100,000, followed by UK and many other countries. And the message here is that we do see similar pattern in terms of increase across the globe in developing countries. We don't really have great data in really less developed region, but overall, this is becoming a global phenomenon. And also alluded by Becky in her early work, and this is dragging down our age of diagnosis for colorectal cancer from 72 to 66 and will continue to decrease. And just bring everybody on board, the majority are left-sided tumor and advanced stage, poorly differentiated, and many are sporadic. The majority are sporadic. And in the past year, there are a lot of excitement in terms of research advances for us to understand on the molecular level in terms of how early onset colorectal cancer differ or not differ from older onset. So this is a kind of a large study coming out leveraging majority data from the United States, AACR data, as you can see here, 82%. Comparing majority also our targeted panel versus whole exome sequencing, mostly from China, with more than around 5,000 early onset colorectal cancer. What they show is that in those diagnosed at younger ages, there's a higher mutational frequency in 137 genes. I didn't put the full list here, but there's also a lower mutational frequency in 6 genes. And the key message from this paper is that this mutational signature difference actually differ by hypermutation status. And in those hypermutated tumor, mostly MSI high, APC and KRAS are more enriched, whereas BRAF and RNF43 are less enriched in early onset. And for non-hypermutated tumor, as we all know, a majority of the early onset colorectal cancer, TP53, are enriched, and BRAF and KRAS are less enriched. And this is a paper that become really exciting in this year, just published a few weeks ago, I think. And the idea here is to really leverage cosmic mutational signature, which is the main framework for us to look into any type of tumor developed by Wellcome Sanger Institute. But the idea here is that they sampled colorectal cancer across the globe with almost 1,000 cases, 132 under age 50, whole genome sequencing, both tumor and normal. And what they found is that Colobactin signature, which is related to SBS 88, ID18, are enriched in early onset colorectal cancer. And based on very complex computational and tumor evolution framework, they do hypothesize that this Colobactin signature coming from PKS E. coli exposure are mostly set up during the first 10-year age of life. And that's based on computational analysis so far. So this group, which is also part of a Cancer Grand Challenge initiative worldwide, they're trying to leverage pediatric tissues and they're trying to really understand the early life origins and the life course trajectory of this mutational signature. All right, that's the major advances in molecular understanding. So about risk factors. And before I jump into what we know already about risk factors, I think it's very important for us to understand the challenges and opportunities in identifying risk factors for early onset colorectal cancer. As you can see here, and we talk about this a lot, early onset colorectal cancer, if we think about absolute instance, 15 per 100,000. That means even if we follow up these 100,000 people for 10 years, you only get 150 cases today. But all these cohorts that we are able to leverage are historical with much lower instance. So it's very hard to identify the right cohort and even the right cohort to pull from to really look into this question. Nationally, internationally, there's a lack of longitudinal data across the lifespan. There's a lack of repeated biospecimen collection across the lifespan as well. And we do have really beautiful birth cohort based at UC Berkeley, as shown on the left, with generation of data. But as you can see, 15,000 to start with, even though they have repeated measurement across the life course, the number of outcome will be limited. And even more challenging is that it's really hard to reproduce these findings across other birth cohort. So that also means opportunities. Shall we start birth cohort across the globe, across all your states, and do it right now using the same protocol so we can answer these questions for our grandchildren? How about efficient study design to bring in different data types from cohort EHR, clinical data, geocoded data, etc.? And what about the causal inference framework? That how can we determine these risk factors are causal and how we leverage AI? So in the past 10 years, we have done a lot of work from metabolic dysregulation to emerging behaviors such as drinking patterns, sedentary behavior. And we also look into different diet component and overall diet quality, as you heard from Becky, also ultra-processed food. We derived diet that based on sulfur-metabolizing bacteria enrichment, etc. We also look really extreme in life, looking into how birth by C-section is contributing to offspring cancer risk, and we do see a signal for women as well. But this is not enough. We can do this for 30 years. The question is how we accelerate and moving forward. And there's a huge interest, of course, on antibiotics. I want to show this paper led by Jeff Lee's team at Kaiser, published recently as well, a large nested case controlled study that didn't identify any association between adulthood antibiotic use with risk of early onset colorectal cancer. Well, there are a lot of research gaps, as I mentioned, most of them centered not only in early life, but throughout the life course until mid-adulthood. What we know is based on what data we have collected. So with that, I want to briefly introduce the Cancer Grand Challenge team that we put together called Prospect Pathways, Risk Factors, and Molecules to Prevent Early Onset Colorectal Cancer. This is led by me and Dr. Andy Chen from MGH. And as you could imagine, the goal of this research team is to leverage interdisciplinary expertise across exosomics, cancer metabolism, computational biology, chemical biology, immunology, stem cell biology, global oncology, precision nutrition, and cancer prevention, as well as a lot of collaborators across the globe, and also with support from more than 15 cohorts at biobanks to really tease out correlation and try to identify causal risk factors for actionable prevention in younger generations. So just very brief, we have 3 goals. The first one is to really leverage a large pool of global cohort to look into lifelong impact of established novel risk factors for early onset colorectal cancer, including microbiome. And we'll then try to figure out the causal mechanisms using chemical and functional profiling in human specimen. We'll build live course animal models and in vitro human models, and really to tease out the human-animal convergence so that we can identify a cluster of causal risk factors that can contribute to the proof of principle test in clinical trials. So with that, I also want to emphasize, in all of these scientific work, one of the goals in prospect to really bring in patient advocate in prevention research and bring their voice in terms of understanding how we can move forward. I'm not sure Mangju is in the room, but one of my global patient advocate is here today as well. And as you can see on the screen, these are the reflections from our scientific community. Scientists, they said the patient advocate are helping us to find the meaning of our work, and we learned how to communicate science, and these patient advocates are our bridge to the public. So with that, I also want to talk about emerging mechanisms and frameworks, which are very, very exciting. So the first one being a review that we put together, showing the correlation between metabolic dysregulation conditions with risk of early onset colorectal cancer and the potential mechanism, especially focusing on mediated by microbiome. But what I really want to share is this ongoing work, almost wrap up, with the NCCRT Net Modeling Lab work that really bring in this new understanding how obesity and any other exposures differ by generation. So we built this shiny app leveraging extensive data, not only from ENHANCE, but also longitudinal data that collected in this country. And the goal is really trying to tease out the cumulative difference between adiposity exposures by birth cohort in the United States. And this one simple figure, which is showing how cumulative BMI years are different by birth cohort. If you look into the horizontal line there at age 35, this is basically showing those born in 2005, which is the yellow line there, they have twice the obesity exposure compared to those who were born in 1965. And these are largely accumulated by age 35 already. Twice the exposure. So in terms of emerging risk factor mechanisms, and this review came out from Nature Cancer from my collaborators, has really bring up the years of understanding on circadian dysregulation, which we all know is relevant for the younger generation, especially its impact on colorectal cancer initiation progression. As shown here, circadian regulation, coordinate cell cycle control, DNA repair, immunity, and metabolism in both homeostasis and also cancer. But at this point, the human study is very limited. The next framework I want to bring up, I think we had some discussion on this already, is tumor age. And this idea, I think it's not entirely new, but it's really important for us to really understand the early onset colorectal cancer biology. Is it growing much faster? Is it coming from traditional adenoma carcinoma pathway? So the tumor age defined here is basically the time from first neoplastic cell to diagnosis. If we understand how this tumor age differs between early onset versus late or traditional onset colorectal cancer, we will be able to design a screening strategy that based on the biology of early onset colorectal cancer. I highly recommend it that you read this. And with that, I think I'll briefly touch upon early detection and diagnosis, which has already been included in the heated discussion as well. So, building upon our early work focusing on signs and symptoms of early onset colorectal cancer, and as mentioned by many of you, 50% of early onset colorectal cancer were diagnosed under age 45. So how can we help improve diagnostic pathways for early onset colorectal cancer? Here we proposed 3 simple strategies for both provider and patient. So at the patient level, we proposed 310. The first 3A, I think the first one is awareness, the second is ACT, and the third is really, sorry, it's really hard to see. 3 strategies, but also 3 strategies for the provider as can do. So the first one is really to consider CRC at younger ages, and I think many of you allude that already. The second is action. Access the family history. And third one is really navigate the entire process to help our patient. Sorry about that, I should remember. Last, I think just to put all these together, I hope you feel the excitement in the field in terms of all aspects from biology, prevention to etiology. And I think, echo everyone in terms of the discussion already. We should really prioritize early detection, and that includes increased awareness and try to understand what are the barriers and at individual level, at provider and system level, and how we leverage the novel technology, tests, and interventions to help with this. And I would also advocate a deep understanding of risk factors, how risk factors throughout the life course is really changing and contributing to tumor initiation and progression. And finally, I think it's time to think together how we can revolutionize prevention. And how can we design life stage-based intervention? And how can we think about from the angle of shared risk factors with cardiovascular disease and others, can we tie cancer prevention with cardiovascular disease prevention together? So finally, I hope you agree that this is such an exciting area. It's sad, but it's very exciting that it's time to rethink about how we work together in the interdisciplinary fashion. And so far, we have already had much better understanding of molecular features, risk factors, and gaps. But our ultimate goal should be very unified, which is advanced prevention. And how can we do that? Last, we need everybody to help. If your specialty is not included here, I would love to include it. Please talk to me after this. But we need everyone to help, especially next generation scientists. In the time that a lot of things are not as expected, we need the younger generation to stand up and continue this work. Thanks, everyone, and I would like to thank my team and all the people who have supported my work. Thanks.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Kao. And we'll do the questions at the end. So next, I'd like to welcome Dr. Durham.
Thank you. I have a show and tell item. Just one second. Hi, thank you very much. I am Lynn Durham. I'm President and CEO of Georgia Core. We are a statewide nonprofit in Georgia that has been around for 23 years, and we have been working since that time to bring more clinical trials to Georgia, but also we've expanded that greatly, and we really are looking at decreasing barriers to access, whether it be to clinical trials, to treatment, to screening, or to prevention. So that is who we are and what we do. Quick disclosures. We came about the idea of having a campaign about early onset colorectal cancer So Georgia Core is the holder in Georgia of the CDC Cancer Control Grant with our partners in Southwest and Southeast Georgia to increase screening rates. And so we've been to these meetings, we've been to many others, and really learned about early onset colorectal cancer. And also, I have to say, I was deeply influenced by my work with Fight Colorectal Cancer's Call on Congress, to go to Congress and speak to them because I met incredible survivors who were diagnosed with colorectal cancer at age 36 and then at age 41 before the screening test was lowered. And I recently had a friend, Sarah Broadus. Some of you may have known Sarah. She died at 41 after being diagnosed at 36, and she leaves behind 4 children. And it really has made it important to me to go out and teach Georgians about the signs and symptoms of colorectal cancer. And so that's what this campaign is about. So we took it upon ourselves as a challenge. The challenge was a campaign that would get 25 to 45-year-olds talking about colon cancer. How do we engage them to know what the signs and symptoms of colon cancer are? So the idea, so we started working with an incredible ad agency called Chemistry, and their president is here. She's in the back of the room, Taylor. If you could wave, please. She lives here in Nashville, actually. But Chemistry has put their heart and soul into coming up with an idea that would engage people in this age group and to talk about the signs and symptoms of colorectal cancer. And so it is called Weird Looking Stools. Because if you have weird-looking stools, it could be a sign of colorectal cancer. And so what we've done is made stools that we have put in bars and coffee shops around Georgia. So I'm going to tell you more about it. So what we've done, again, we've made these stools. This is the artist. His name is Julian Scalia. He's actually from New Mexico. He and his wife drove 35 chairs across country to Georgia. They made all these chairs. And what the intent is to put them in bars and coffee shops and get people's attention. They immediately walk up to them and say, "What is that? Why do you have that?" And we have a lovely QR code right there that explains that. But these are some pictures of them in bars and coffee shops around the state. We literally called bars and coffee shops and asked if they would be willing to do this. And we heard a lot of stories. "Oh, my grandfather had colorectal cancer. Oh, so-and-so did. I would love to be part of this." So along with this, as I said, we have a sign right by the stool. On the back of that sign, it has a QR code so they can go to our website, which I'll talk about. And then if it is a coffee shop, we give them sleeves, coffee sleeves to put around their coffee cups as you're walking out. And if it's a bar, we give them coasters to have underneath their beers or their drinks so they have something that they can, again, walk away with. So we created a landing page, weirdlookingstools.com. Anyone can go to that. And we're driving people to this page to get more information. So it has information on what are the signs and symptoms, and also what they should do if they have those, but then also information for those 45 and up about screening to make sure that that is part of the message, that they understand. And we are hearing so often from these bar keeps and coffee shop owners that people go, "Oh gosh, I haven't scheduled my colonoscopy," or "Oh yeah, I need to do that. I'm 45 now," or "I'm 50 and I have never done it," or whatever the conversation is to get people going. I put Colorectal Cancer's logo on here because they have been incredibly helpful. They allowed us to use their quiz on our website and so much other information that they have provided. So I wanted to thank them so much. So we've activated media around the state. And so we have billboards all over the state. In Atlanta, we have a lot of digital billboards, and in some of the bigger cities, Savannah, Augusta, Macon. But in smaller areas with high incidence, these small counties that have high incidence, we have the old-fashioned billboards. And I have just driven around the state last week delivering stools. Yes, I had a cargo van from Home Depot and delivered stools around, and I saw so many of these signs around the state and getting people's attention. So we've done targeted media, we've done Instagram ads, whatever we need. We had videos. The team from Chemistry at our launch party made a lot of videos. They've been talking to survivors. Actually today, right now, they're interviewing more survivors to be able to put them as part of this campaign. And then we've also just been out and about in the community, making sure what we can do. We had a launch party. That middle picture is from an art gallery. They had an an exhibit of all cancer-related art, and they asked us to bring the stools. And so they were there for 2 weeks as part of that. We also, on the right, our friends from Colorectal Cancer Alliance allowed us to come to their Atlanta walk and showcase what we have. So the results so far, I know this is very hard to read, but so many of the comments are saying, what a creative way, how innovative, how engaging, what a cool way to have this conversation. And so it's getting the reaction that we want and the results that we want. We had to return our slides in several weeks ago, so I checked this morning, and we're actually over 70,000 hits to that website. And so we are thrilled with that number. Thank you. And so that tells us it's working. People are looking at it, they're taking that QR code, they're going to the website, and they're trying to find out more about it. Our paid media impressions, over 12 million. I don't even know what that number is now. And then earned impressions. So we worked with a PR firm to go out and to pitch the idea to media, both national and local. So where there were stools, so we were in Atlanta, Valdosta, Athens, Macon, Columbus, Albany, Augusta, Savannah. We go to their local media and ask them to do a story. But we've also had interviews in Oncology Times, in Women's World, in the Griot, Black Press USA, and then the ad world has just fallen in love with this. We were on the cover of Ad Age magazine. I don't know if it's a physical magazine, but Ad Age. We have done this. This has really taken a life of its own within the advertising community because of the creativity of it. And so we're thrilled with that. These are some of the articles and things that you see that have come out that we have been part of and been interviewed for, and we're getting that message out. And you all talked about family history a little while ago. That's part of our messaging too. It's Thanksgiving time. I know it's not comfortable to go around in Thanksgiving and talk about your colorectal health, but we need to do that. We need to make sure people are having those conversations with their family. So this is our campaign. We launched it September 15th. We are thrilled with how it's going. It'll run through November 30th, and then we will pause a little bit. A lot of our hospital partners want to put them in their lobbies, so we're going to kind of put them around the state in the hospital lobbies. And then in March, we'll bring them back out, and we're targeting Black-owned businesses in March. And so for the month of March, for Colorectal Cancer Month, we will really target Black businesses and do a little bit deeper dive on that. So that is what we've done. So thank you very much.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Durham. Next, welcome Dr. Yoshida.
Wow, it is going to be really hard to top that, right? What? But I liked what Dr. Kyle said. She said that we need to focus, if we're going to tackle this, we need to focus on a lot of different aspects, right? So we talked about focusing on the public education. So my sphere is about provider education and how we can sort of tackle that. I have nothing to disclose. So I was really interested in introducing early age onset colorectal cancer into the medical school curriculum. So any of us who have worked in academic medicine know that it's our privilege to work with and to train early trainees and teach them. And we train people from 18-year-old undergraduates all the way up to 30-something-year-old GI fellows. So really thinking about when should we think about initiating early onset colon cancer education, I really thought that probably the first-year medical school curriculum was the best time to do this. And really because it's the preclinical classroom learning, and these are captive, engaged audience of about 100 Gen Zers that you've got in a class. This preclinical clerkship, first-year medical students are taught really in a sort of organ-based system. So you're taught 2 weeks of pulmonary, 2 weeks of cardiology, 2 weeks of renal disease, and GI diseases are usually kind of in the middle there. So my two colleagues, Ann Tusky and Niril Shah, teach the GI preclinical clerkship at UVA, and I asked them if I provided them with the slides, would they introduce early onset colorectal cancer into the curriculum? And they were very, very willing to do that. So why should we engage medical students in the fight against early onset colon cancer? Well, first off, these are young people, and these young people are going to have this, who could potentially have this disease. So we want them, for their own personal benefit, to understand about what the symptoms are and to know that this disease is present. But also, these are young clinicians that are going to go out and become the next generation of doctors out there. So no matter what their specialty is, whether they're pathologists or dermatologists, if they are able to know these symptoms and know that this is increasing in incidence, even if they have patients or family members, are going to be able to talk to them about early onset colon cancer and potentially save lives. Next, we also want to shift the public and professional perception. You know, a lot of people have really thought of colon cancer as being an old person's disease, but by training these new, younger generation, it'll become more usual to, if a young person comes in with symptoms, for them to say, we need to start thinking about early onset colon cancer if you have blood in your stools or if you have a change in your bowel habits. Ultimately, we want to cultivate advocacy and prevention mindset, and as in all education, we want to enhance an interest in research and intervention, because these are going to be the next clinical investigators who are going to hopefully work with Dr. Kao and do some great things to try to solve the etiology of this problem. So I gave my colleagues 4 different slides, and I'm going to show you those 4 slides and tell you why I made the slides that I did. So the first slide is really about epidemiology and increasing awareness. These are Gen Zers. So these kids are born around 2000, and so they're really, really young. This is the generation that's never known what it's like to live without the internet, right? So all of these young people are very digitally fluent. They use social media to connect with people, and they get a lot of their information by social media. So we're about to teach all this GI stuff, you know, gallbladder disease and diverticular disease, GERD. So I really wanted to make this have an impact. So the first slide that I created was much more like what they would see in digital media, right? So I tried to have kind of good colors and kind of sound bites of information, but as well as really highly impactful survivor stories to kind of get it across to them and get their attention as to the fact that colon cancer in young people is increasing. The next slide was more medical school-like, and it really was about the key facts about early onset colon cancer. But on the left, more importantly, was about the symptoms of early onset colon cancer and making sure that they are aware of those symptoms, and that if a young person comes in with those symptoms, right, that they should be aware that colon cancer is a possibility, but the more symptoms that they have, the higher the chance that they could have early onset colon cancer. And then the next 2 slides that I offered them came from Samir Gupta's 2024 Clinical Gastroenterology and Hepatology article, and it's about the birth cohort effect, and then secondly about early onset colon cancer potential causes and mechanisms. So they did a great job. My team introduced all 4 of these slides, and the GI clerkship is always very popular. It always gets amongst the highest ratings amongst the medical students. But I heard a lot of good feedback about this. So there were a lot of questions after, and there was a lot of engagement about these slides. So I think it begs the question, can the NCCRT or any other group scale this idea for all medical schools? Can you take this sort of pilot that we've created at the University of Virginia and try to recreate it for more medical schools and more medical students? So I talked to a number of educators about what they would like if we needed to develop an educational toolkit on early onset colon cancer. It is not only about providing the slides, right? Oftentimes these clinical clerkships are taught maybe not even by gastroenterologists. So we need to provide the slides with the notes, with context about what's important in the message, as well as references if they want to be able to learn more about this so they can make these slides their own. And also learning objectives are also important. I'm going to move along here. And this is about education. It's medical school, so there's always testing. So they always wanted us to also create questions, and very clinical questions that could be relevant to what the materials that are taught. So that's kind of where I left it. I am just going to switch gears a little bit because I really want to share with you some of the things that we're doing in Virginia about engaging young trainees about early onset colon cancer. Along with this medical school curriculum, we also have a March Early Onset Colorectal Cancer social media campaign at UVA. A number of you have heard at the Southeastern Colorectal Cancer Alliance, my colleague and current GI fellow, Tala Mahmood, she created a number of social media posts with internal medicine residents and GI fellows. And during the month of March, they put these very, very colorful and very informative social media posts out on all of our UVA sites. And so it's been great. They're going to do it again this year. We've been able to get some survivor stories with help with partnering with Allison Rosen, and we do it in English and in Spanish. And then our Virginia Colorectal Cancer Roundtable, one of our chief residents in medicine who's about to become a GI fellow, does that mean my time is up? We've been able to work together to get trainees from all 4 of our medical schools in our state, and we're about to embark on a statewide colorectal cancer, early onset colorectal cancer campaign in March of 2026. I'm going to leave you with this picture because this is the first year class that got taught this curriculum. It was, the curriculum happened in March, and so we were able to pair it around the time of Dress in Blue Day, so you'll see they're all dressed in blue, and they're all highly engaged. They came out to see the inflatable colon, and if there's anything that can give you hope, it's these young, really excited people who have just been trained about early onset colon cancer. Thanks.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Yoshida. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Dwyer.
Okay, wonderful. So everyone, I have to tell you, I'm definitely everyone here who has flu, cold, what have you know how this season's been a little rough. I was so excited about being here today. I actually went and got my hair done and got a blowout, and they said, hey, are you doing this for the CMAs? And I said, no, I'm going to NCCRT, and she says, well, also very important. So I just want to say thank you, Nashville, and CMAs. This is the CMAs for me, and I love you guys. So on behalf of that, so I just want to say no disclosures. I'm going to talk today about an initiative that I have the chance to be involved in with Fight Colorectal Cancer, one in the National Advocacy Organization who is really at the, at the nexus of thinking about research advocacy, and specifically talking about an early onset consortium that's growing and been built off of a think tank that was actually delivered in Barcelona, Spain this past June. And so I'm excited to share a little bit about that consortium, which is really a 2-year initiative building out of a one-day conference. And I think some of the names that we've heard, Dr. Chan, Dr. Jose Perea, have been great advisors in the work and senior advisors. And with the Fight CRC, Dr. Kieran Olagan, who's recently come on, and I think Ryan Soyson really helped us build an amazing day that has led to an amazing initiative. But really, when we thought back to about a year and a half ago, engaged the international advocacy community and said, if we're really going to think about early onset and research, which direction do we need to go? And it was fascinating, I think, from all of the folks who gleaned information from their advocates, from Canada, from the UK, from Australia, the Western European, the global cancer community. It was still around this nexus of like, what are we doing for causation, and what are we really thinking about where we're going? So I'm going to share a bit about the recap of that specific initiative in that day, which included 18 countries who are in attendance, 23 who are now engaged in the work, now 70 attendees from the day in Barcelona in June of 2025, so just this last summer, but now which has grown to over 100 individuals from 25 different countries. And Yen, I loved the data that you suggested, that the number of countries where we see this, and really all of those countries, by and large, have been engaged in this work, but we still have work to go. So what this day was really an initiative and an invitation for investigators who are focused in research and etiology and causation and a 2-year global initiative. So it began with a conference, but the goal was to develop and execute a unified global research strategy. So I think we've all been to a lot of meetings that are great starters, continued discussion, but really the name of the game of this initiative is over the next 2 years to develop connections and unity amongst the global research community, really think about understanding the drivers to deeper understanding the etiologic research, and launch this initiative, which we're now actually 6 months into. So the scope of the work was really around understanding what are those drivers based on etiology. Out of scope for the meeting were insurance coverage, screening guideline, health system innovations. We really want to talk about what are we thinking in terms of the initiators, as we know, around causation. And although there are a lot of contextual elements focusing specifically on these areas of focus for the meeting itself. So on the 18th, we gathered for about a quarter a day to hear some international advocacy partners sharing perspective, had some time to meet and greet. We did a real fun exercise where everybody brought a piece of candy or snack from their region or their country and exchanged a little bit of information about why it was important. And so let me tell you, there's some wild snacks out there, and I had all of them. So that was fantastic. But what I thought was great is that day, which several participants who are now leading part of the initiative and were invited were in the room, is we got a really good chance to talk about what do people think from worldwide perspective, what do they think those drivers are, had an opportunity to review that information, and then really talk about how do we set up strong work groups moving forward. So initially, of course, what were the things that we needed and to design this perspective? We confirmed in that meeting that incidence, of course, is rising in countries like the US, Australia, Canada, Germany, and then other areas where we see areas where we're seeing falling rates. But there are parts of Latin America, South America, Asia, where we're also seeing this increased trend. And then for some of the areas of the world, it's still too really, too soon to kind of know based on some of the data capture, which is an area that we hope to progress. We know that rates are rising, increase in disease, and ultimately it's not just an artifact of improved detections. Patterns do not vary by sex, making hormonal causes unlikely, and the disease primarily affects rectum and sigmoid colon globally. So part of the idea is that we were talking about the dramatic shifts in diet and high-processed foods, which of course is with Dr. Chan in the last week with the JAMA article, the circadian rhythms, which Yin spoke to, some of the interesting data that's coming out of those, more evidence and emerging evidence out of microbiome. Of course, those genetic predispositions, and then also disparities suggesting unique global drivers. So I think this is a lot of what we think is kind of the smoking guns, but from a global perspective, if we're going to research and move forward, really having a strategy to move this forward. So in terms of how well we did, I think folks really felt like we were developing unity with the countries who were engaged. We did a great job of really creating a network, but in terms of really helping continue thinking about what are those drivers and the areas where we need to show further representation, we have some work to do. So now that we're 6 months in, with the folks who have joined in that day, we've created 4 very strategic groups. One that's actually led by Dr. Kathy Ng, who's here today with Kevin Monahan out of the UK, is specifically looking at what are those scientific research themes from a global perspective that we need to really move forward. We're moving through a process right now for data gathering around prioritization, making sure we have global input, ensuring that we're looking at developing an opportunity to look at the level of evidence, the amount of implementation of research in those areas, but moreover, creating some consensus about what future directions could look like in the research areas. So in the next coming weeks, we are going to be solidifying those specific areas, but I do think, per my previous site and what we've heard, we do know that intersect at exposome, as well as looking at genetic factors, things like dietary patterns, as well as looking at things such as, really looking at kind of the microbiome, as well as other areas, will be things that we would need to continue to further move forward. The EPI tools and biobanking are really getting a better understanding that if we are going to do this research globally, what resources and assets exist in terms of looking at biobanking and what are the biobanks that are existing, what's in utilization globally, but not just in the published literature as well as folks who are, kind of the routine folks globally, but what are we learning about some of those more sort of rudimentary, or what are some of those more homegrown approaches that might not otherwise be represented, and that's something that we're really embarking on. Dr. Heather Hampel and team and several of our investigators have done an amazing job of looking at some of those epi tools core components that we need to look at in terms of like standardization and moving the field forward. But that's another area, and right now in the epi tools, Josh Dim, Jen Weiss are leading out that work, and then our biobanking partners with our Dan Buchanan as well as Claire Pallas out of the UK. So we're really excited that this is really, I think, a large consortium, one of the first where we are seeing multi-continent collection of investigators really coming together, looking at the lay of the land, but also ultimately looking at where should we prioritize this work moving forward. So, the clock is ticking. We're a year and a half left to go. We have 6 months. But I think kind of consistent with what we've heard this panel today, there was also a organic ask that we really also think about risk stratification for those who are symptomatic as well as asymptomatic. What are we thinking about timely interventions for patients, as well as things such as education to the community and awareness opportunities moving forward? So moving ahead, I would just say for the biobanking and epi tools, we are still really in seek of those who are working in the community, whether it's domestic or globally, to have the representation within these biobanks, so we really can really think about just retrospectively, but moving forward, what we can collect and how we can help look at uniformity and standardization. There is a global patient survey that has been put into play right before the event, and we're going to be relaunching that. And then we are going to be having ongoing opportunities for global discussions at the ACR meeting in Montreal, GI ASCO here in the US, and then even looking at ESMO, and then ultimately, I think with the Insight meeting, a number of our investigators meeting in Singapore as well. If you're interested in joining, I think we're really still open the opportunity up until January. We'd really like to gain some great momentum. But Dr. Kieran Langone is our contact for the work. But I would also just say that on behalf of the young survivors, Kim, Jill with the Fight CRC board, Kim lost her battle and she was instrumental in moving this research. And just to really thank Mila, who's from Spain, is a 23-year-old Miss Spain. She was actually in the Miss Universe pageant, and she's been an amazing advocate talking about her walk and really wanting to continue to really seek that the global advocacy community engage in that work. So Kathy, Chris, I think Asma, Heather, there's many folks who've been really involved in this work with us, and I just want to thank everyone and join you. I think like Ian, you said, it's really an amazing opportunity for all of us to really come together, domestic and global, so thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much. Great presentations by everyone. And I'll start off with the kind of questions. First question to Yang. I was wondering, just based on the epidemiology that you showed us in terms of where in the world we see the rise in early onset colorectal cancer, as well as more granular data that we know for the U.S. for different racial ethnic groups. Based on those types of trends, does that give you some clues as to what are the most likely kind of drivers for the rise and increase? For example, you showed your work in NHANES, right, in obesity. Do those trends kind of correlate with the trends that you see in the U.S. and in subgroups within the U.S. or worldwide?
Yeah, really great question, but I don't think we know the answer. I think this is probably $20 million question. I think really there's a couple of issues here. When we look at the global data, there's always issue of quality of data, and Becky can definitely speak more about this. So when you look at these trends across the globe, as I even talked to an investigator in Italy, there are a lot of issues with their national data, etc. So really understanding the local context is very important, which as Andy alluded to, we need local investigators to jump on board to really bring culture-specific, local-specific understanding of risk factors, so that we can map all these exposures together. And the second challenge here is really computationally and also data-wise, how we bring the data across the border together. That has been a forever challenge to date, not only to my team, I think down the road for many of us as well. So there's not clear mechanism how we can bring the data across the border and to really do all these racial specific comparison. But I think you asked a really, really great question that we should really think about how we leverage country-specific, region-specific, racial-specific data to really learn from, especially from some regions that colorectal cancer are not increasing, what we can learn from there, right? So I think those are some bigger questions that we haven't able to tap upon. Yeah.
Thank you. Question for Lynn. So, you know, this is extremely impressive, like a very creative, obviously, a campaign. I was wondering if you're going to, you know, I think a lot of us have thought about maybe locally how to kind of do campaigns on a smaller scale about increasing awareness. When you come up with the idea, how do you predict that it will work? Is it do you do market research, or do you know? What's the process of predicting that you think it will be successful?
I have to be really honest and say we were like the dog that caught the car. We asked the state legislature, we asked the Georgia legislature for $250,000 to launch a colorectal cancer awareness campaign. It takes months to go through the legislative process, not knowing if we're going to get the money. Well, we got the money in March and had to use it by the end of the fiscal year. And so it was like, you just had to get it done. And so we went and worked with chemistry. They came up with 4 different ideas, actually. The pole dancer, we did not do. Like, no, we're not using state money on a pole dancer ad. But anyway, they were very creative, very, very creative. But to answer your question, honestly, we would have loved to do some market research and try to figure out. We really worked with we have a great group in Georgia, the Georgia Cancer Control Consortium, of which I'm part of, Dr. Jim Hotz is part of, helped found actually. And so we went to those colleagues, talked about it. We went to colleagues in our colon cancer grant that we have, but we did not have the opportunity to go out and do market research. We really thought what resonates, what is engaging, what is something that a 25 to 45-year-old person may be willing to take their picture in a bar with a stool and post it and get some reaction to it. And so it was pretty homegrown, to be quite honest with you.
Thank you. I'm sure a lot of people will be asking you about what the poll answer idea was in the networking session. But,
we'll talk.
Question for Cindy. I was wondering, so you mentioned, I think, that, you know, at UVA, the way you kind of got it into the med school curriculum was by approaching the GI course directors. But kind of as other people are potentially thinking about doing a similar thing, is that kind of generally the way to go, or do you have to seek like the medical school, like UME approval to get those things in? Or?
What's taught in the curriculum generally is, So what's taught in the curriculum generally is kind of up to the different medical schools, so you don't need any approval per se, and it's just really engaging the people that are teaching the clerkship. So it's not a hard thing at all. It's just a question of, they don't have every clerkship in medical school doesn't have like a national group that we can go to with all these slides, right? So that becomes a little bit of a problem. But I think you could go to the program directors of internal medicine and then find out who the clerkship directors are, because they usually are aware of who the educators are, and then we can get to them by that way. Yeah, so I think there are ways to get to the medical schools for sure.
Yeah, thank you for creating those slides, because I think that they'll be really helpful for a lot of med schools that don't already have that in the curriculum, so thank you. Andy, I was wondering, so in terms of the global early onset CRC think tank, the kind of the path forward is the idea that the think tank will come up with best practices and, you know, kind of white papers for like how we do things, and the best, you know, most important research topics we should focus on, or are you going to, you know, will you be organizing kind of specific research projects within the think tank as well?
That's a great question. So right now the consortium, right around each one of those areas, around the research idea as well as biobanking, the tools, part of the real opportunity is the state of the state, and there will be publications out of each one of those. And I do think around the specific drivers of research, For areas where we see the biggest focus, I think we'll see work groups specifically looking on publications, but also state of the state, as well as opportunities, what are suggestions moving forward. So I think most of those might come out in white papers, but I think we're hoping to really use what's in the peer literature and really make sure to contribute in that manner, so that way we really are looking at ensuring that we do evolve. I think one of your questions also is like in terms of the projects. I think coming out of this work in 2 years, we are hoping to meet again and just say for the areas where we see the biggest opportunities, priorities, what are the funding opportunities? And I will say the early on, the advocacy organizations have already started having some of these discussions. So I do think Cancer UK, the Cancer Grand Challenge, we're at the meeting. We've already started to discuss with Stand Up to Cancer, who are also going to be ultimately hosting a meeting, an innovation summit at the end of January. They're starting to really frame up, and so we're really informing these ideas. But to your point, yes, it's of course keeping the group together, contributing to the literature around those specific areas, but I think also making sure from the domestic side, looking at global opportunities for funding. But we've also started to engage the Australian government and several other governments that are really looking at how can they be an active partner. The UK has done a great work in this area too, and I will say, Becky and I met this morning, who was also a big part of the work and driving that, is also using the data to help us think about where we're going, and for where we do have gaps for the, like Ian as spoke of, for the country or some of the region specific, also kind of getting some opportunities of how we could do further enrichment to ensure the data really helps move that work forward. And I just want to say, I'm also on the National Navigation Roundtable, and for all of our screening navigators out there, woo, woo, okay, that's it.
Great, thank you. Questions from the audience? We have 10 minutes left, so yeah, right. Yeah, if you just go to one of the mics, it'll be easier for everyone to be able to hear.
Hi, well, Rich, you always get a chance to talk. So this is really great work. I really appreciate the look at early onset colorectal cancer globally. I think, and it's for every cancer, and I've been trying to think about, like, well, what could it's not going to be something specific to colorectal cancer probably that's driving this. It's probably something larger that's happening globally. And I think one of the things, well, I was really impressed by a New York Times article that I read a few months ago that suggested that the average American now, because of microplastics, has a plastic spoon in their brain. And there's a lot of literature, I think, now suggesting that microplastics might be really important. I didn't hear anyone talking about that, and I'm wondering if anyone's talking about that in any of these settings.
I think microplastic is everywhere. The challenge is how we study it, how we measure it, how we reliably study it. It can be reproducible. So we have been in active discussion with chemists, not only on my Cancer Grand Challenge team, but various chemists who are enthusiastic about moving this forward. And I think the foundational challenge here is that this will go beyond the traditional epidemiology in terms of measurement. It's a time to think about how we work with chemists, with engineers, to really tap into biology in a way that can lead to meaningful intervention. And as we communicate this challenge with our patient advocate and the public in general, we want to tell everybody, if there's a way that you can reduce microplastic, for example, drink filtered water, do it today. Don't wait until we generate another paper. It's not worth it. So I think there needs to be a balance in terms of what we look into in a way that is really beneficial for the society.
I think that's really important. I think, like, if it is something like microplastics that's so ubiquitous, like, it's going to be a huge problem, and I just don't know how we're going to address it, because the damage has already been done to many generations, and I don't see how we're going to get it out of our environment. But
I agree.
I would say that
Yeah.
I would say that that actually is a theme coming up through whether they're considering some environmental, that there's sub-themes under in microplastics as an area. I think what the thing you said too is I think one of the areas was around risk stratification and doing something now for the things that we absolutely know, while there's some of the areas that might be more difficult. I think that is a huge theme, and I know that's coming up today, but to your point, definitely making sure that we look at interventions, screening, behavior change early, that could definitely be a part of something that would be risk reduction.
Yeah, thank you so much for the panel, Rich Flender. One thing we did not talk about, and it's not on our agenda, but I think it will need to be next year, is the GLP-1 drugs. The modeling, what data we have, shows substantial reduction in incidence, and there was just an article, I think this week, showing colorectal cancer survivors on GLP-1s who had a high BMI had a marked survival advantage, probably better than many of the chemotherapy drugs they're on. So I'm particularly interested if GLP-1 drugs have come up. I realize access is a challenging problem. It won't be forever. I think they may be vital to chemo prevention and reducing burden of cancer.
So we do have a GLP-1 molecular prevention trial in the Cancer Grant Challenge. So the goal is really to bring it to individuals with advanced adenoma and trying to follow up to see if they have molecular changes that are relevant to colorectal cancer. But I would broadly comment on this. I think it's important we think about this in the broader context of obesity-associated cancer, not just colorectal cancer. If we can lower the price substantially and increase the access, that potentially can be a huge benefit to the society. And again, do we need each individual of these molecular trials to be done for each of the cancer? I think we need to sit together to think about a strategy how we advance chemo prevention for younger generation.
One thing too, to your earlier point, sir, around the whole idea of like looking at early onset, not just for colon and rectal cancer, and I think the GLP-1 discussion is coming up. I do think, especially for breast lung, where we're seeing increased incidence in the young, I am interested because the Stand Up to Cancer meeting is actually going to examine, and I think NCI was on the precipice, and Dr. Rathmel and team around looking at what could be those sort of core elements, or what do we know, not just particularly for colorectal cancer. So I do think this is part of the thing that we'll be, kind of managing as well. But to that point, Rich, I think Kathy, something we'll probably be talking a little bit about these research themes that engage.
I just wanted to address my comments to Cindy. Thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. It's very creative what you've done, very clever. And I don't think that we've actually really discussed how we can educate, medical students. Well, I've been running the second-year student GI course at Mount Sinai for about 23 years now. And just on my own, when I in the beginning of the course, I say to the students, how many of you have parents who are older than age 50? And hands go up. Then I say, how many of you have parents who are over age 50 who have had colon cancer screening? And some hands go. And then I say, okay, for those of you whose parents have not gotten screened, you're going to go home tonight and call them and tell them that Dr. Itzkowitz is going to fail you in the GI course unless they get their screening. But seriously, for the last some of you may remember about 3 or 4 years ago at this meeting, Paula Chambers-Rainey, who's a survivor, now does a lot of advocacy work with Fight CRC. She told her story. She's a black gay woman living in Texas. Very horrible story where her symptoms were ignored, and her wife, who's white, gets all the privileges and she doesn't. And I devoted a session the last 3 years just to colon cancer disparities in that course. And so Pascal White, I don't know if Pascal's here yet. So Pascal sets the stage with colon cancer disparities, and then Paula on Zoom from Texas tells her story to the class, and the jaws are just like on the floor. So there's a lot of opportunity here, I think, not only to create curricula, but to engage survivors. There's a lot of survivors in this audience, and they could just Zoom in to medical classes and tell their story. And it would be really easy, I think, for us to organize that. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think this is something we really should think about.
Did you fail anybody?
Yeah, I'm Jim Hotz. I work with the group in Georgia and with Community Health Center Committee. There's been some research recently looking at recurrence rates of late-stage colon cancer reduced by exercise in randomized trials. You haven't mentioned much about the role of exercise in young adults to help prevent cancer. Do we have much research out there? What would we tell our patients about the role of exercise in preventing cancer?
So broadly speaking, exercise is definitely beneficial for colorectal cancer and early onset colorectal cancer. I think at the population level, if we look into our data in the US and many countries, exercise is actually increasing in younger generations. So what really matters here is another concept that is often confused with physical inactivity, which is lack of exercise. It's sedentary behavior. So biologically and pathway-wise, it can be a distinct behavior in younger generation as well. And I think our years of research along with others really show that prolonged sitting, regardless of domain, is increasing risk of early onset colorectal cancer and also associated with poor survival as well. And the challenge, I think more broadly, to validate these findings is that we don't have a lot of cohort that actually assessed sedentary behavior in a reasonable way. But with wearable devices, can we do that better? And second is that mechanistically, we don't have a beautiful mice model who can sit for a long time, who can really help us understand the exact mechanism here. So I think, but broadly speaking, reducing sedentary behavior is very important. It's very prevalent in the younger generation, especially in minority population as well. That has been shown as well in this country.
Okay, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
And I think that's a perfect segue to our networking break where we get up. But before that, please join me in thanking the panel. Thank you.